Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Dead by Daylight. I played it on the Xbox One. It's also available on the PC and PS4. Yes, I'm aware it's been on the PC for quite a while now. So we can basically skip over it. There's not a lot of story. You either play as a survivor or as a killer, and there's a bunch of different killers you can play as, or a bunch of different survivors. The reality of it is, most of the survivors are very similar. You can get special abilities that can differentiate them, but overall, they're pretty much the same, and they're all apparently mechanics. All of the survivors must have been on their way to some kind of mechanic convention because, well, one of the goals in this game is to fix up old and busted generators, and the only reason I can think that these guys know how to is that they all used to be mechanics of some sort. But then you can also play as the killer, which I honestly enjoyed far more, and I'll get into that a bit later. But the killers are each unique. They all have their own abilities, and that ties into the gameplay. So since there wasn't much of a story, we'll really just jump into the audio, and the audio in this game is actually one of the key elements in this game. Generally, I say that audio is there to enhance, but in this case, it really is a key gameplay element. When you're the survivor, you need to keep an ear out for what is going on around you. You need to listen for the killer. You need to listen for certain cues when you're fixing the generators. But I think audio is even more important for the killer. As the killer, you need to listen for the survivors. You can hear them working on the generators if you're close enough. You can hear them hiding in lockers. If they're running, you can hear their footsteps. It's super important for finding them. But not only is it important like that, the audio design itself is actually excellent. I really think the sound effects add a lot to this game beyond the gameplay element of it. They just sound good. They help create a creepy environment. I won't necessarily say scary. I know some people think it's a scary game. I personally didn't find it scary, but that could be because I spent the majority of my time playing as the killer. But as the survivor, I still didn't find it to be scary. I'll also add in that I think the music added another layer. I think it's very good and matches up with the game well. Okay, so gameplay mechanics. This is one of those lopsided asymmetrical games where it's 4v1, but it's not really versus. It's more like 1 versus 4 because the survivors can't really do much to fight back. They have a limit of what they can do. They can disable the hooks that the killer places them on, maybe shine a flashlight in his face to make him drop a victim, but they can't run up and beat the crap out of the killer. So as the survivors, your goal is to fix up 5 generators so you can open the gate, or if you need to escape another way, if enough people have left and you find the secret hatch, by enough people I mean you're the last person left and you find the secret hatch, you can escape through that. I will say that as the survivor, I didn't find the game as interesting. I didn't mind playing as a survivor. I did it, I don't know, half a dozen times. I definitely found that there were lulls in the game. The pacing was off. The first time I played, I was wandering around forever trying to find a generator, and then when I did, I would work on it, and that was kind of intense because I was waiting to get murdered half the time. But then the rest of the time I spent in that match looking for another generator because all the other ones had been fixed and I couldn't find another one to fix so we could escape. It got intense every now and then when the killer was nearby, but still there were a lot of lulls when I was playing as the survivor, and that got really boring for me. And admittedly, as the killer, there are times where you're not necessarily chasing somebody, but at all times you're hunting. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that I actually enjoyed playing as the killer so much more. Speaking of which, playing as the killer, your job is to, well, kill the survivors. And as I mentioned, there are different killers and each of them has their own unique ability. I personally liked both the nurse and the doctor the most. I found them to work for me. Probably the doctor more so, but I did very well as the nurse. But each of them has their own special abilities. You use those to trap or track the survivors, and then your goal is to whack them a couple of times and put them on a hook. They can escape from the hook, which can be a real pain in the ass, or they can get taken off the hook by one of the other survivors, also can be a pain in the ass. But that is your goal. To win as the killer, your goal is to basically place 2 or more, preferably all of the survivors on hooks and get them taken away by the entity. Also, key to gameplay, and I feel like most people probably know this by now since this game has been around a while. The survivors are in third person, which is interesting, and the killer is in first person. And that does really matter because as a survivor, you can hide in a way that, like, you can still see all that is around you, but the killer may not be able to see you. They may accidentally just glide right past you because they didn't see you because they're in first person. When it comes to the controls, I feel like the killer's controls are better mapped out than the survivor controls. Admittedly, it's very easy to change the controls up, which is very good for this game because, honestly, playing as the survivor kind of hurt my hands. A lot of the buttons you need to press are not like natural buttons on the controller. But like I said, it's very easy to go in and change those buttons around. I think that comes from this being a PC game originally. Now, as for the killer, I found those very comfortable. The buttons you use are much more natural buttons. Rather than using the LB and RB, you use the triggers, which makes more sense. But as the survivor, it's just initially mapped to LB and RB for things that you use a lot. The one complaint I do have is, and maybe I just missed it in the options, admittedly entirely possible, I couldn't find a way to permanently switch my controls over to inverted. I always use inverted camera, so pressing up makes me look down, and vice versa. Whereas this is like immediately, if you look up, you look up, you look down, you look down. Fortunately, they mapped a button in the game so that you can just hit the button and bam, you're inverted. I just wish I could have permanently set that feature. Lastly are the graphics. This is not a beautiful game. It's not like it's a horrible, ugly game. It's not like it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not like playing a PlayStation 1 game when we're in the PlayStation 4 era. But a lot of the textures look like crap. It's just disappointing because a lot of the textures are far uglier than you would hope. I mean, I do understand that this is originally an indie title, but I've definitely seen indie titles that have looked far better. That having been said, it's not like it's the ugliest thing I've ever played, and I do like the art design far more than the graphics. By that I mean, I like the way the survivors look, I like the way the maps look, I like the art style to it, I love the way the killers look. I think they're horrific, and that's what they should be. I just wish there were better textures, and it just overall looked more like a game of the generation that it is part of. But to wrap this up, I actually found myself enjoying this game far more than I thought I was going to. I'm generally not a huge fan of the asymmetric games, or games that are pure multiplayer. It probably helps that this wasn't a full-price title, but it's also the fact that it was just a lot of fun. It's well balanced. Or at least I found it to be very well balanced. I have seen instances online where it's very unbalanced. You have a bunch of really unskilled players against a very skilled player, but that's true in any multiplayer game. Overall, I'd recommend it. I had a lot of fun playing it. Okay, so in the comments below, who is your favorite slasher type killer from movies? Let's go with movies specifically. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.